Welcome to this episode of WinServe Toots. Thank you, everybody that's been writing in. Thank you, Greg, for your wonderful comments. I'm glad the videos have been helping you refresh your IT skills. This week's video, as you may guess, per request will be some stuff on user account management. And essentially, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at some best practices when managing our user accounts, because in all reality, the action of just manually creating and deleting user accounts is quite simple. But when you work in a larger enterprise, the actual logistical pieces of managing all of your users, making sure that when users are terminated that they're removed from Active Directory, making sure that certain restricted groups like the administrator groups only have the appropriate users that they're supposed to have. That sort of more advanced functionality can sometimes be a little bit taxing. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce some PowerShell. It's something that I've wanted to do in the video series anyway, because of how important PowerShell will be in the next version of Windows. If you don't know, Windows Server 8, the next server operating system, will be command line by default. Using PowerShell. So it's really important that if you want to maintain a strong grasp of the Windows technologies, that you really start to get used to PowerShell and get used to using that technology in your day-to-day administrative tasks. So let's get right in. So as you can see here, we have a couple of, this is our general users organizational unit. And if you haven't gone through and if you didn't watch our syslog tutorial or my syslog tutorial, I would really recommend that you do that, because let's say you're a company. I'll actually give you an example. I'm doing some consulting work for a pharmaceutical company and they fall under HIPAA compliance. One of the necessities for a lot of compliance is a centralized logging solution, right? And as you can see here, these are all the logs from the different hosts in my environment for the past couple of days. So when looking at user account management, we're here back on our domain controller. Let's say that there's a nefarious person, or maybe it's a disgruntled employee, and that disgruntled employee went through and deleted an important service account like the SQL runner account. If you remember, we created an SQL account when we set up our SQL server, and we use this specific account to operate the services that the SQL server will run. So if I'm an employee and I'm upset, maybe I just come in here and I delete this account, and maybe I just come in here because I have the authority to create an account in Active Directory, and I say, I want to do some things that aren't necessarily within my scope, and I want to try to hide my tracks. So I just come in here, and if you've never created a new user account in Windows, we just go to that good old-fashioned dsa.msc, and that's just, I don't even know where it is from the menu, because Active Directory users and computers, and this will open up. So if you just need to create a new user, you can say right click anywhere in this pane here, and I actually have an organizational unit for this, but you could say I want to create a new user, and we'll just call him Sam Stone, I guess. I think that's a guy from a beer commercial, but I'm not totally sure. Maybe I should spell that right. So now we have Sam Stone. He has a user login name of S Stone. We're gonna set his hyper secure password here, and we're gonna be done. Okay, so now we have added Sam Stone to our Active Directory group. And let's add another user. Let's say we've got 2 new people that are being hired into HR, and let's say Lisa. Lisa. I don't know. Maybe we're into 80s pop music. Lisa. So here we go. That's Lisa. I think that was her name, and her ultra secure password. And we should really, make the user change the password at the next login. This is something you should definitely do. Should go through here. And so now, let's say what we would like to do as, let's say actually Lisa and Sam Stone, we've hired them as VMware administrators, right? So I'm the manager of the company, and I say, well, I know I've got Lisa and Sam here that I've hired as our VMware administrators. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this EXI users group, and I'm going to add those two people in addition to Al here, who's been managing our VMware environment. So I'm going to do L Lisa and add her, and I'm going to add S Stone and add him in here. So now we have 3 users in our ESXi users group, so they can do certain prescribed functionality within VMware. Just a little bit beyond the scope of this video. So this is essentially the simplistic way. But now imagine if you work for a company. I happen to work for a company, and we have 65,000 employees worldwide. It is not feasible to search through a whole huge Active Directory structure, right click, see who all your members are, and then start writing these down. Imagine instead of 3 users, you had a team of 40 or 50 people that was managing your VMware infrastructure, or let's say it was 100 or 200 systems engineers to manage your Windows infrastructure. So how can you accomplish managing your groups, the positions that people have within the company, and making sure that people are only in the groups that they're supposed to be? Well, first of all, it starts off by doing something that's not fun, and that's documenting. So, let's say I'm a business and I have set up this VMware environment. I'm actually happen to be in VMware here, and I've created a group. One group is for our VMware administrators, and they're going to be our engineers, and then this group is for our VMware kind of power users, and they have more limited functionality within the environment. Well, let's say somebody transfers out of the VMware department or transfers in the VMware department. In all honesty, actually maybe I can just show you an example of mine. You should have things fairly documented, IP addresses, things like that. So let me log in here. And so sometimes simple spreadsheets would work. Is I've got IP addresses mapped out to my certain host names and things like that. You would have something similar if these were the groups. You would definitely have all the people listed in your groups. And this is just my lab environment. I just like to document things. So now that we have our groups, we have our users, we understand why we need to document our groups and our users. How do we then go through and see, okay, well, we just know that Sam Stone and Lisa were created in our Active Directory environment. But if I'm on the security team, right, and I have the change managements that have come through, and I'm not, a manager, I need to be able to verify that those people and those people only were added to the environment. So the first thing that we want to do, actually let me take you back to the domain controller. I want to kind of introduce you to PowerShell. And PowerShell is an amazingly powerful tool. It is a command line tool, so it is a little bit different than what most Windows administrators are used to working with, but it's very easy to start putting into practice in your day-to-day work tasks, and you'll find that for a lot of repetitive tasks that Windows administrators like to do, it will don't like to do, it will remove that burden. So the first thing I want to do is we want to start querying our Active Directory users to see everyone that we have in our Active Directory domain. So we've already stated we need to make a list, and now we want to actually see all the users in our Active Directory domain. So what we're going to do is from PowerShell, there is some functionality that's built into PowerShell by default. But in order to get at different PowerShell modules, you have to import the module. And so that is unfortunately, that is exactly what we'll do right now. We want to import the Active Directory module so that we can use the Active Directory commands to get users within Active Directory. So this is just simply import module Active Directory. If you're interested, and you saw the little blip went across the screen that imported it. Same thing if you're working in Exchange or SQL, things like that, you can import those modules. Pardon me. So now what we want to do is we want to run a command. So just because we're talking about users, there is a command called get AD user. Okay, if we just hit that, it'll tell us that we need some options. Essentially, that's what this is telling us. Well, how do you know how to use these commands if don't really know much about them? If you're familiar with a Linux or Unix environment, they have their man pages, and Microsoft has done a really good job with helping people learn the Active Directory commands, or I'm sorry, the PowerShell commands. So you can literally just say help get AD user. And it's very similar to a man page in Linux, right? I mean, it tells you information, you have the syntax, things like that, the description, it will tell you exactly what it does. And then now if you see here, to see examples, type get help AD user examples. So let's do that. So now, and then this will give us syntax examples, right, of exactly how we can search through our use this search tool. And if you see here, like get AD users, right, Glenn John, so this is a name here, and then properties. So we want all the properties for our user Glenn John. Okay. Just continue through here. So what we're going to do is, let's say that we have a change management group, if you follow ITIL practices, things like that, and you have a complete list of all the users that are supposed to be in your environment. So what we can do is we'll do get AD user, okay, and we'll just do filter. We want everything, and this will literally spit out to us all of the users that we have in our Active Directory environment. And as you can see here, we've got Lisa, we've got Sam Stone, we've got Al Roma here, our service accounts, my particular account here. All of the accounts in our Active Directory structure that we have is right here. Now, if you're also familiar with Linux commands, this little character should look mighty familiar to you, the pipe. And what we're going to do is we are going to, because we don't want to sit here and look at it on the screen, we want to be able to pipe the results of our output to a text file so that we can either print it, we can compare that file to a previous version, things like that. So let's say you've set up your Active Directory environment, right, and you've saved all this data, and now you're going to go back a week later and run this same report again, and then you can do a comparison on those two files to make sure that no unapproved user accounts have been added. So how we're going to do that is this. We are going to do get AD user filter. We want everything, and then we're going to do out file, and then we will give it the name of the file. So we'll just call it users.txt. And so now if we go to, where is it at? C users SILO. This is my C users. We have users.txt here. So this is data, and you could, if you had some sort of web app, you could import this. You actually have the option to format this data in XML and HTML, things like that. So we'll save that for another Active Directory tutorial, or I'm sorry, PowerShell tutorial. But now you can see you literally have every single user account that has been created in your domain. This is really wonderful, and it's actually a requirement for things like HIPAA, for Sarbanes-Oxley, SAS-70, things like that. You need to know who is in your environment. And the great thing about using PowerShell in Active Directory is instead of having to go through, maybe like on some other operating systems, and looking at local users on each box, this information is propagated through the entire directory structure. Really, really great, really beneficial. So let's just review this command real quickly, right? Because this is an important one. It can really help you. So get -ad user, and we're going to use the filter parameter, so /filter and star. We're going to get everything, and we're going to dump it to, pipe out file users.txt. So let's say this is great, but we only really care about, let's say, what do we got here? The distinguished name, I guess. Sure, let's just pick distinguished name. We want to know where all of our user accounts are residing at. So we do get AD user filter, just like before. We'll grab everything, and now we can do select, right? And we'll just do name. So now you can see we just have the names of our users: administrator, guest, service account, my name, SQL runner, Sam Stone, and Lisa. So there is a reason why we are able to do this pipe select name. And if you're used to working in a Linux or Unix environment, essentially when you do your command, so let's say you do a PS, right, like a process command in Linux or Unix, which will bring up all the processes on your system, this will work the exact same way because of something called an alias in PowerShell. So, but there's a difference. When you do a PS in Linux or Unix, you get back a wall of text, affectionately is what we call to it. So then, if you wanted to find, let's say, the amount of memory that, let's say, PowerShell is using, you would then have to do like PS, then you'd have to pipe it to grep, and then you would look for your string, PowerShell, and then, then if you wanted to only get the amount of memory that PowerShell you were using, then you'd have to pipe it to like cut, and then you'd have to pick the field and all this other sort of stuff, right? It's because in a Linux and Unix environment, you're just dealing with text. Everything is text on a screen. The really amazingly powerful thing about PowerShell is you can think of this as a database table. So just like if you were to be working with a database table, you could literally query. So if we want to, let's say, take a look at, what do we have here? We will select, we'll do PS, select, what do we got here? CPU. As you can see here, it's not formatted especially nice, but we can literally just query all of the CPU data. And I don't know if this will necessarily work, but let's do CPU ID and process name. So if we do CPU ID and process name, we'll get just those three columns. So we're not searching and grepping through and parsing out text like we would, and to clear the screen is just clear, like we would in a Linux or Unix environment. If we're looking at this process table here, we can query on any of these different columns. We can search through and select just different names, things of that nature. So it becomes amazingly, amazingly powerful. So that's where we'll leave off for the general piece. So we've gone through, we've seen that we can query out of Active Directory with our get AD user command. Let me do it properly. With our get AD user command, all of the users in our environment, things of that nature. So, but how do we translate this into something maybe security related? Okay, so we know, because we've had another video on syslog, that all of our log data is dumping to our syslog server, and this happens to be the repository in my lab environment where all that syslog data is being held. Okay, so I've got 21 files. This has been up and running for a couple days here, just demonstration. So what I want to do is I want to use PowerShell to search through all of these logs, and in order to see the new user accounts that were created in my environment. So let's say we know that we have a change management process that all of our user accounts are created by one designated account. Let's say it only happens on Friday, and the change management is implemented Friday sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight. That is where we've established as a company that our new users should be added, and you can actually add new users within a script in PowerShell, so you can automate it. Super cool. So how do we use our log data that we're getting from that last syslog tutorial and make it something useful and valuable to us? So what we're going to do is we are going to use another PowerShell command called select string. Okay, and this is really familiar, very similar to grep if you're using grep. And what we'll do is we'll feed it the path option, and as you can see here, we're in the same directory. We're in eSecurity logs, and in here this is eSecurity logs. So what we want to do is we want to look at all of these log files. So we're going to do star.log, okay, and what we want to filter on is, we'll call it pattern, because it's a pattern that we're looking for. And let's say we want to see all of the new users that were created. Now there's a couple ways that you can do that. There's an event ID, and the event ID for when a user was created is called, it's changed a little bit in Windows 2008 and R2. It's 4,720. If you're used to the older version of Windows, you're probably used to something in the hundreds. So there's a bunch of event IDs that we could look for, but actually if you query for an event ID, you'll get more results than just when a user account was created based on that specific ID. So what we want to search for is a user account was created, because I know that this text string will be in my log every single time somebody creates an account. The same thing if an account was deleted, right? It's this same type of deal. So let's say you have an administrator and he wreaks all sort of havoc through your environment and is deleting user accounts. You could find out who it is. But let's just look at here. Select string, right? This is kind of like our grep. The path that we're looking for is, because we're in the current directory for all of these logs, we're going to look in all of this log files, so start.log, and pattern a user account was created. So let's see what that pulls up. Okay, so now we see here that we have several results from our query. For some reason it took a moment there. Select string, the path log, pattern a user account was created. So as you can see here, you get a lot of data, and it's a little bit hard to read in this format, but then again you could do your out file and do results.txt. So let's try that. This might take just a moment. Oh, actually you can see it's already created the document. Okay, so you might be able to put it in here. It's not always the nicest formatting, just as a plain text file, but again you can actually export this data depending on the import and export options that you have is an XML format. So let's look at and see what this data is that we have here. So this was actually a user I created previously. Maybe you remember the display name Sam Stone, right? This other display name Lisa. And now what you'll notice, there will actually be another name in here that will identify who created the account, if I can actually spot it in this. So as you can see here, this account name, SILO, right, that's me, actually created this account, the Lisa account. So her Sam account name is here, my account name is here. So the mix of using PowerShell with something like syslog and things like querying Active Directory can really help you manage larger, more complex environments, or simply allow you to pull data in a way that might be required for various sort of compliance initiatives like SOX, HIPAA, PCI DDS, things of that nature. And in fact, centralized logging is a requirement for a lot of those types of initiatives. So if you're dealing with credit card transactions, if you're dealing with healthcare data, if you're a publicly traded company, these are definitely things that you should be interested in looking at, because they're free to implement in your own environment, and you can really do a lot with just a little bit. Just as one little bonus that I kind of want to show you, because I don't really like typing select string all the time, you can actually create an alias in PowerShell. So instead of select string, you could just type grep, right? My actual command line days are usually more from Linux. So I would like to set an alias, and I would like to call my alias grep, and I would like to create an alias for that select string option that we were using. So now, bada boom, bada bing, I can go through, and instead of having to type and remember select string, I can just do grep. Oh, oops. Well, as you can see, it's actually overwriting our file. Here, let me not do it to a text file so you can actually see what I'm doing. So there we go. I just did grep up here instead of having to remember that select string. So it's really nice that Microsoft allows you to do that. You can go through and you can transfer a lot of your knowledge from Linux, Unix type of command line experience into PowerShell. So I hope this met the requirements for user account management. This was actually a video request from a reader or from a viewer. Thank you so much for your requests. I really do appreciate them. It gives me ideas and forces me to go and explore new things. Again, thank you for everybody that's been watching. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching here on windsurftoots.com. Do check out the web page. I will actually list out all these commands that I was using, so you can copy and paste them, save them for your own. And I'll actually also have some of the common IDs that you should probably be looking for in your log file setup if you are interested or concerned about security, or you are worried about compliance type of initiatives. So all that information will be over on the website. Do follow us on Twitter, and it's just windsurftoots on Twitter. And thank you very much. Have a great day.